This is my quintessential list of must-reads for every budding photographer out there. Some of these books may be familiar to you, some of them you've never heard of, but I guarantee they're all going to teach you something very important about your craft. So let's get into it. Hey guys, I'm Carl Shay Soda. Welcome back to my channel. I take the influence out of photography and I focus on what makes you money, not what makes you spend it. And today, 1 minute, I have got a huge bunch of books that I want to talk to you guys about that I believe you all should read. Now, I know a lot of people get their information from YouTube or TikTok, but there is stuff in these books that is so important for anyone who wants to take photography seriously. You don't have to be someone who's going to make a living off it. Even if you're just interested in it as a hobbyist, these books will help you to think deeper and really develop the nuance in your work. So let's start with our first book, which is this one I'm wagging around. Our first book is Camera Lucida by Roland Barthes. Now this is an uncomfortable book. It doesn't hand you the answers, it's going to make you ask better questions. And it's not a how-to about photography, so you're not going to get that practical advice. What you are going to get is an understanding about what photography does to us on an emotional level, a psychological level, and a philosophical level. When Roland Barthes wrote this, his mother had just passed, and that grief is baked into every single page. It's really raw. And what he does is he uses photography to try and make sense of memory and the strange feeling that a photograph is both present and absent all at the same time. He looks at images and he sees ghosts, and he talks about two key ideas here, studium and punctum. Now, studium is the general interest in the photo, what you can explain, what you can see. And punctum is the part that hits you in the gut, that thing that you can't articulate. It's like that tear in the fabric, that detail that wounds you a little. And once you understand punctum, you start seeing it everywhere and you start searching for it. And it's in every frame that you take. That's the power in this book. It's the depth. It challenges you to stop thinking about photography as content and start understanding it as an emotional, existential act. So what Barthes really does with Camera Lucida is makes you confront mortality, is making you look at the depth in photography, and that can be really uncomfortable. What you're going to do is start to pay more attention to the nuances in the things that you capture and also what's potentially missing in the frame. So if you're up for a serious read, grab yourself a copy. Once you have recalibrated your compass reading Camera Lucida, the next one you need to read is Susan Sontag's On Photography, another mainstay of the photography world. This book is a scalpel. Susan Sontag doesn't flatter photographers here. She doesn't romanticize the medium. She really interrogates it. She's challenging the assumptions that we carry around every time we lift up a camera. And I think this is really important now in the social media age, particularly with the TikTok generation. And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying sometimes it's really important to pay attention to the greats like Barthes or Susan Sontag so that we really understand the depth and meaning behind what we're doing. At its core, the book On Photography is about power and what it means to aim a lens at something or someone and freeze them in time. She forces you to ask, what are you really doing when you're taking this photo? And how many of us are thinking that these days? Like, are we documenting? Are we consuming? Are we controlling? One of her sharpest arguments is that photography can dull our empathy, and I think we see this a lot, particularly at the moment with a lot of discussion around war. The more we see images, especially of the suffering, the more numb and desensitized we become. So a photo of war, famine, and injustice, it's no longer shocking us because there's always another image and then another after that. She also explores how the act of photographing something can strip it of its context and its dignity or its complexity. A photo really flattens things. It can capture a moment, yes, but at the cost of everything that became before it and after it. But the real value in this book isn't just the arguments, it's the way it makes you stop and question your intent, something that I think we could all start to do a lot more of, particularly with social media. So if you're using a camera, this book demands that you take responsibility seriously. It's going to ask you, are you making images that mean something, or are you just adding to the noise? Sontag doesn't hand out these compliments. She expects you to show up with intellect, with self-awareness and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable. So if you guys are up for a second difficult read, chuck that one on your list. This one's a little bit easier to read, so maybe start with this one first. All right, now we're getting away from the academic stuff and we're going to focus on some practical. And this is Light, Science and Magic by Phil Hunter and Co. Now look, if you don't understand light, you cannot call yourself a photographer. Photography literally means painting or drawing with light. So you really do need to get your head around lighting, and this book is a great start. This book is the Bible for learning how light actually works. It's got no trendy setups, there's no influence of fluff, it's just fundamentals that apply to every shoot you're ever going to do. This book breaks it all down: the angle of incidence, the inverse square law, specular highlights, diffusion, fall off. I know it sounds dry, but until you realize this is the language of mastery, it's really gonna hold you back in your work. This stuff will stop you guessing. It'll stop you making silly mistakes and instantly elevate your photography, so you can start crafting. The reason I recommend this book is it's not teaching you how to copy someone. It's teaching you why things work the way they do, how to use light to shape people, to shape objects, and to do it with intention. So it doesn't particularly care about whether you're shooting with a studio flash or natural light. What it's doing is teaching you how that light's behaving so that you understand it and you can walk into any room, grab whatever's around, and build your set. Now, you guys have heard me say this before, this stuff isn't sexy and it's not meant to be. This is the practical stuff that so many people overlook and underestimate how important it is in your work. So if you want to truly master light, you need to understand it. You don't just need to copy what other people are doing, you need to know why it's behaving the way it does. So I highly recommend this book if you really want to get your head around lighting. Now, I know it looks like I'm giving you some like super academic reading, and to be fair, the first three were exactly that. But the reason I'm giving you these books is because I feel like these days we focus so much on the social media side of any new skill that we're learning, whether it's, TikToks and YouTube or Instagram Reels. Once you understand the superficial, you need to dive deep into things so that you understand why it is that you're compelled to do things. There's going to be certain things that you're drawn to, certain things that really take your interest, but by ignoring the stuff that you haven't been exposed to yet, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, which is why this is my fourth book. Now, this is called ISMs, Understanding Photography. This one is talking specifically to the visual language of photography. And it's actually really nicely presented. I love it when a book's easy to flick through. And none of these books I recommend that you read from cover to cover, by the way. Like, grab a chapter, read it, put it down, come back to it later. Except for the light one. That one you kind of need to read it so that you understand everything. But for example, if you're just sitting there with a coffee or a cup of tea and you just want to take a 15-minute break from scrolling social media, you can pick it up, focus on one page. And why did I pick the nude page? That's just perverted of me. Sorry about that. But let's pick a different page. Let's go War Report. Wow, we're really hitting the heavy topics here. So what it's going to do is talk about the art movements themselves, different things like, postmodernism, but also some of the more nuanced stuff. So war reportage, surrealism, Dadaism, still life, fashion. What it does is just gives you bite-sized information about those movements so you have a little bit more context to what you're doing and why you're studying it. So this is a nice little quick read. It's worth having, worth grabbing a cup of tea and sitting down and reading. So get it. All right, the next book I feel like is a bit of a buzz book. It was massive a couple of years ago, but if you don't know who Rick Rubin is, he is the man behind some of the most popular songs in history, and this is his book. It's called The Creative Act, and it's a great read. Again, it's a nice, easy read. This isn't as academic as the other ones that I've showed you, and you can just read a nice little chapter. But essentially what he's doing is just giving you that like crazy uncle advice, the stuff that you will never pay attention to that comes only from someone who has been the leader in their industry. Now, Rick is not a photographer. He is a music producer, but he is an expert creative. So I really enjoyed this book, and I actually find myself picking it up quite a lot because, again, it's not talking to me specifically about photography technically or, understanding the art world. It's teaching me how to be creative. It's teaching me how to get out of my own way so that I really immerse myself in whatever it is that I'm trying to capture, and to sort of block out the stuff that takes you off that path where you really need to go. And I know I sound like I'm dancing around, but that's kind of what this book does. It's not a directory. You're not going to sit there and be like, aha, I understand this now. It's just getting you to sort of unpack all that stuff that you sit on top of what you really want to be, you know, like whether it's your social media feed or the feedback from your friends and family, that's all the stuff that sort of bogs you down. And what Rick reminds you to do here is to just really embrace your curiosity, to tune into your intuition and start to be a little bit more like intentional with your work. So that is a great book. You don't need to be a photographer to read that. It's just something that will help you really embrace your creativity. All right, this is one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and it has absolutely nothing to do with photography. It is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who is the founder of Nike. And yes, this is the story of Nike, but it's so much more than that. This is like, honestly, the most chaotic, raw and deeply personal account of someone being a founder, someone who's colored outside the lines, someone who just basically got punched in the gut time and time again, but somehow managed to get back up and create what we know as the monolith of Nike today. So this kind of book I think is so important for creatives because it teaches you to break the rules, essentially. Like learn the rules. I think that's a Picasso quote. Learn the rules so that you could break them. And why I love Phil Knight is that there were some huge players in his industry. You know, you had Adidas, you had Puma, you had Converse, and Nike was kind of that like outlier, the one that no one took seriously, the one that everyone was like, oh, you're never going to make it. And how many of you guys can kind of relate to that? You're never going to make it. There's a million photographers, you know, you're no different, you're no special. Phil Knight will really inspire you to just look at the way you're showing up in the world and just basically go, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Excuse my French, but I think so few of us are encouraged to risk things. You know, we're very risk adverse. We're very much conscious of other people's expectations and the judgments from the critics. Phil Knight's going to encourage you to just take that idea and just risk it all. And if you guys have seen the movie Air about Michael Jordan, also a great one. It's just one of those like incredible stories that you just can't help but feel like going, yes, I can like take on the world now. So if you haven't read it, read Shoe Dog. My next book on the list is Let the Elephants Run by David Usher. And I've actually taken the cover off because I hate paper covers. But this book is a rallying cry for anyone who's ever said, I'm just not creative. The author is a successful musician and a tech entrepreneur, not a photographer, but he takes a sledgehammer to the myth that you are just not creative, right? This is a guidebook. It's also sort of like a creative manifesto, and it's also that permission slip that sometimes we feel like we need to make weird, imperfect, glorious stuff again. Again, getting out of your own way so that you can embrace that creativity. For photographers, this book is not, again, it's not a technical guide. You're not going to learn about f-stop in here. What you are going to learn about is mindset. And it's going to remind you that creativity is not magic. It's not some like divine spark that you either have or you don't. It's a muscle, and it's one that you've got to train and protect and deliberately use. You know, use it or lose it, as they say. So if you're wondering what he means by let the elephants run, essentially what he's doing is using the elephant as a metaphor for your wild, creative imagination, right? And the rider, which is your logical, organized self. Most of us keep the elephant locked up, afraid it's going to ruin our carefully curated lives or our businesses. But creativity is supposed to be chaotic and messy. And I think so few of us want to embrace risk these days because it comes with a set of judgment and criticism that becomes really uncomfortable, but it's where the good stuff comes from. So this book is going to encourage you to get out of your way, to embrace the mess, to just be a little bit weird, be creative, get things out on paper. And as photographers, I think that's really important because we can get really stuck sometimes, particularly with the sciencey technical side. So reading a book like this is going to help you just sort of embrace that inner kid, right? That inner kid who just pick up, you know, some random thing and start being creative with it. We don't do that as adults. So this book is going to inspire you to do that again. All right, the next one is something that I feel like is really important for us as we're really starting to mature in the digital age, and particularly with the rollout of AI. Sometimes I think it's important that we consider the implications on ourselves, on the culture around us, on the people we're photographing, and this book speaks to that. So this is Bending the Frame by Fred Richten. And I read this as part of my master's. And what is this essentially talking about in this book is the impact of photography itself, particularly when we're doing photojournalistic stuff, and that's not to say that you're working for a newspaper, it means all that street photography that we're doing, all that sort of voyeuristic photography, there are some real responsibilities we need to take into consideration. And this book is going to ask those hard questions of you to make you think more about why you're doing what you're doing and any potential consequences that come as a result of it. So for context, Fred was an editor at the New York Times magazine, and he's been thinking about the ethics of photography for a really long time. And obviously when you're publishing something in a really big magazine like that, there is a massive duty of care that needs to be undertaken. And I think when you're in the professional world, this sort of makes sense, right? Like, yes, sure, you take that into consideration. But with the digital world, particularly social media, I don't think enough of us think about this too often. So for all of you budding street photographers out there, and all of you guys who just take your cameras and start taking photos of people at train stations and walking streets, you need to start thinking about this stuff, because you have no idea what you're witnessing until after the fact. And the last book I'm going to recommend for you guys is a technical book. This one is the Complete Color Harmony Pantone Edition. Now, this is all about color theory, and there's some really good books out there, but what I love about this one is you're going to see these different color palettes, and you'll start to learn the language of color and what works together. And why this matters so much with photography is I think people will consider color after the fact. They look at the colors after the photo's been taken. And particularly if you're someone that's trying to take moody shots and to really sort of document that which you see, color plays a massive role in it. And I see a lot of people leaning into color grading because they're trying to make things look cinematic because it looks better on Instagram. But when you understand color and you comprehend how that color affects the mood, you can start to frame things differently by being able to lead with color. So if you're not familiar with color theory, there's so many good books on it, but I highly recommend this one. I don't necessarily read this back to back, but what I do is I draw some inspiration from it. So if I'm looking to take like a really interesting moody portrait, I might have a bit of a flick through and be like, actually, what I'm going to do is do a really subtle mood, and I'll try and match the tones in my background or even the clothing that my subject's wearing to one of these color palettes. So this is a great reference to use ongoing in your work. Now, would I really be a YouTuber if I wasn't plugging my own stuff? Of course not. I actually have 2 books that I've written, and I want to talk to you about them very quickly. So the first one is Six Figure Creative. Now, this book came about because I was mentoring a lot of students, and I just basically kept saying the same thing over and over again. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to create a resource that is tangible and actionable and that people can refer to time and time again to help them as they're building out their creative business. Now, there's 2 versions of this book on my website. There's one specifically for photographers, and there's one that's a little bit more broader and general for creatives. So whether you're a graphic designer or a copywriter, you'll still get the same out of it. The photography one is the one I have in my hand, and you can download it as an ebook, or if you want, I can send you a physical copy. But what it is it's a step-by-step guide. It's a practical guide of how to set up a creative business. So there's everything in here from building a service guide to usage fees to pricing your work, which I know a lot of people get stuck on, the anatomy of a landing page, like how to build a proper website so that people can understand what it is you do. So that is my first book. And my second book I have just finished, and it's called Illuminate, and I don't have a physical copy, so I'm going to pop it up on screen for you guys to look at. But this is my ultimate guide to lighting. So again, this is a resource I collated together because I do a lot of lighting workshops, and I wanted to give people a document that they could take home and refer back to throughout their work. So in this book, I talk about light in a much more simple way to understand. As much as I love that light, science and magic book, this is a bit more general. This is more aimed at the beginner to really get their head around, tonality, natural light versus artificial light, warm light, cool light, all those things. And then at the end of it is a bunch of lighting recipes, and lighting recipes are exactly that, a recipe of how to set up your shoot to take really beautiful photos. So it's a practical guide. It's also a little bit of information that's going to help you become a much better photographer. So If you want access to either of those books, the links are in the description box below, and I would love your support. So thank you if you go and buy them. So that is my definitive list of books you should read as a photographer if you want to really understand photography, the art itself, and make yourself a better artist. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because, I'm guilty of this myself. I learn a lot off YouTube. I'm always on my screen, scrolling on social media. And often I can't even remember what it was that I was looking at. So, if I've been in a deep scroll for like 20 minutes, I couldn't even tell you what I was looking at. And I know I enjoyed it for like the 2 seconds I looked at it. But when it comes to reading a book, if you can allow yourself to find the time to sit there and be focused, whether it's 15 minutes or 2 hours, you're going to embrace your imagination a little bit more. You're going to retain this information, and it's going to just be sitting there marinating in the back of your brain, and when you least expect it, it's going to manifest for you in your work. And I don't feel like you get that from TikTok or YouTube. So if you've learned anything from this video, there is so much to be learned in these books, and you don't have to take it all verbatim. Just take the bits that apply to you and just go on your merry way. So with that all being said, get off YouTube after you have liked, subscribed, and commented your favorite books below, and go read a book. And I shall see you in the next one.